This episode was originally released as a bonus episode of Real English Radio and is now being released to the public. Enjoy. What's going on, my friends? You are listening to yet another episode of Real English Radio. I'm your host, Tony Kaizen, and I know you guys love these crazy Reddit stories just as much as I do. So in this episode, you'll be listening to stories about the insane things and people that employers have to deal with. Now, just in case you're not clear, I want to explain the two terms employer and employee really quick. So, employer, this word refers to the person who's giving someone a job. Typically, the business owner, the boss, the hiring manager, whoever it may be. And then the employee refers to the person who is doing the job, the person who gets hired or contracted to do a job. That's the employee. All right. So let's get into these stories about these crazy ass employees, right? The people doing the jobs. Here we go. Story number one. A few years ago, I was a kitchen manager at a place in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if this is common knowledge or not, but drug use in kitchens is very common and most of the time accepted. That being said, I had a line cook who had come in tweaked out on cocaine. He came to me, explained the situation, apologized, and asked if he could run somewhere and come in a little later in better shape. It was slow, and most of the prep was done, so I said he could have an extra hour. He comes back 45 minutes later and is calmed down. He stopped shaking, and he had a grin on his face. He was one of my better line cooks, so I was glad to see that I didn't have to reprimand him. We begin the dinner service and everything is running smoothly when I look across the line and he begins to look as if he's falling asleep while working the grill. He assured me that he was fine. 15 minutes go by and I see him collapse, landing with his face and arm on the grill. He didn't even wake up. I run across the kitchen, push him off, skin literally melted to the grill. As he hits the ground, he wakes up and simply says, "Oh shit, chef, may I go to the hospital?" The smell was horrific. At 7 p.m. on a Friday night, we closed the restaurant, opened all the doors and windows, and cleaned up the mess. As I'm doing my order for the next day around 10 p.m., he comes back in, bandaged up, and says, "Chef, can I help with anything?" Astonished, I couldn't reply. And he continued to explain that he went to his dealer's house and got a shit ton of Oxycontin, snorted it so he could calm down, and he just nodded out. "But it's okay, they gave me morphine so I can still work. And I'm a dumbass, so don't worry about workers' comp. I just want to still have a job." 2 weeks later, he returned to work, sober, and hasn't touched a drug or had a drink since. I arranged so that his hospital bills were paid, but he had no paid time off. One of the best employees and craziest motherfuckers I will ever meet. All right, that's the story, my friends. Actually, after the story, this person added a little bit to what he or she was saying, and this person says, "After seeing how much you guys like this story, I contacted him. It's been about 3 years. He met his now fiance at an NA meeting, which is probably some type of organization where you can go if you're addicted to drugs or alcohol and you need support. And so now he's expecting a daughter in a few months and was just about to become a sous chef at a restaurant opening in Atlanta. He moved there because he said that Charlotte was too dangerous for him and there were too many haunting memories. Thank you guys so much. It makes me proud. He cried thanking me on the phone when I told him about this, and I would have probably not done so if it weren't for this. Thank you from the both of us." So just in case that last part isn't clear, this person is saying, after reading all the responses on Reddit, this person contacted the crazy employee after 3 years have already passed, told them about this, and they cried and reminisced, and now he's in Atlanta, he's going to be a sous chef, he's sober, he has a fiance, everything is good. So the person who wrote the story is saying, thank you guys for all the responses here on Reddit. Now that's story number one. So before we continue, I'm going to go back through the story and explain a few key words and phrases, even though you guys do have access to the vocabulary guide, so you can take a look at that. and learn at your own pace. But for those of y'all that are just listening, I'm going to go through the story one more time. All right, here we go. So this person says, a few years ago, I was a kitchen manager at a place in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if it's common knowledge, but drug use in kitchens is very common and most of the time accepted. That being said, blah, blah, blah. That's the first thing I want to explain is that being said. We typically use this phrase at the beginning of a sentence to contrast whatever it is that we said just a second ago. So, a few years ago, I had a kitchen manager in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if I don't know if this is common knowledge, but drug use in kitchens is very common. Now that I've said that thing, let me contrast it with the following statement. The following statement is, I had a line cook who came in tweaked out on cocaine. Now, tweaked out is something that you'll often hear when people are talking about drugs, especially hard drugs. To be tweaked out just means to be, it's what happens when you take certain drugs and you just start acting crazy and neurotic and, you're very excited. You got tons of energy. You're acting in a very unpredictable manner, similar to the way somebody might act if they snort a bunch of cocaine or or smoke some methamphetamines or some shit like that. They start tweaking and this is slang. This is slang. I don't know if they say this in the UK or in Australia, South Africa. I don't know. But in the US, if somebody's tweaking, it's similar to saying they're tripping, which is similar to saying that they're acting crazy. They're acting very strange. They're acting in a neurotic, unpredictable, not so normal way. That's what it means to be tweaking. So if somebody's tweaked out on a drug, it means that they've taken this drug and now they're tweaking, they're tripping, they're acting crazy, right? So this guy is tweaked out on cocaine. He went to his manager and explained the situation. He said, I'm so sorry, boss. I had an 8-ball of cocaine before I came to work, baby. 16 cigarettes, 7 beers. You know how I get down. No, you know what I'm saying? And the boss was like, look, it's slow right now, so you can have 45 extra minutes. When we say it's slow, we're just referring to the rate at which business is being done. So if the restaurant is slow right now, it means there's not a lot of customers. The employees working there can move slowly because there's not a lot to do. If it's the opposite, would be very busy. We wouldn't really say fast. The restaurant is fast right now. That sounds weird. It's either busy or slow. You see? So the restaurant was slow. Most of the prep had been done, and prep is a word that's very commonly used in restaurants, and it just refers to the complete word preparation. Because before you can serve food, you have to prepare the meat and the vegetables and the grill and clean everything and blah, blah, blah. Do all your preparation or do all of your prep before you actually open the restaurant and start serving customers. So because it was slow and most of the prep had been done, the manager said, listen, you can have 45 extra minutes. Go and get your shit together, right? So he comes back later. He's calmed down. He's not shaking anymore. And he has a grin on his face, which is like a slight smile. It's like smiling, but you can't see his teeth. That's what a grin is, right? So he's grinning. And then the person telling the story goes on to say he was one of the best line cooks. So I'm glad I didn't have to reprimand him, which is similar to saying I didn't have to scold him. I didn't have to punish him for doing something wrong. It's just a more formal word for that, typically used in professional contexts. So they begin the dinner service. Everything is running smoothly, which basically means everything is going smoothly. Everything is operating smoothly. No problems, no hiccups, right? And then the person telling the story looks across the line, meaning looks to the left or the right, down the grill where all the employees are working and cooking food, and sees this guy collapse and lands face first on the grill. His face and arm are fucking cooking on the grill because he's gone to sleep. He didn't even wake up. So the manager runs over, pushes him off the grill. His skin was melted onto the grill. Imagine putting a piece of cheese on a grill and watching it melt, slowly liquefy. That's what happened to his skin, bro. Melted skin on the same grill where you cook cheeseburgers and fucking pork chops and shit, man. That's wild. So he hits the ground. He wakes up and says, "Oh shit, boss, can I go to the hospital?" And all they can smell is this dude's burnt skin throughout the entire restaurant. So she sends him, or he, I'm assuming it's a woman, I don't know why. But the person, the boss, sends this guy to the hospital. He gets bandaged up. They had to close the restaurant because the smell was so bad. And then the guy comes back and says, "Listen, what really happened was I went to my dealer's house, which is short for drug dealer, the person who sells me drugs. I went to his house and got a shit ton of Oxycontin." Now, a shit ton of anything just means a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. So you have a lot of drugs, a ton of drugs, which is much more. It's a stronger way of expressing it. And then a shit ton of drugs, which is just like a lot of fucking drugs. Now, of course, we don't necessarily mean tons. Literally, we don't mean kilos and kilos and kilos up until you get to a ton. It's a way of emphatically expressing that it was a lot. It's very common in informal American speech. A shit ton of Oxycontin. Now, just in case you don't know, Oxycontin is a very powerful prescription drug. I believe, I don't know, I might be mistaken about this. I think it's a painkiller, but I'm not sure. But now I'm curious. Hang on. Oxycontin. Oxycodone or Oxycontin, sold under various brand names, is a semi-synthetic opioid used medically for treatment of moderate to severe pain. So yes, it's a painkiller, but obviously a lot of people are in zero pain and still take the drug because they want to get high, right? Or maybe they're in some kind of emotional, psychological pain and that's why they take drugs. But that's another subject, isn't it? So anyway, he went to his dealer's house, got a shit ton of Oxycontin so that he could calm down, right? Because he's high on cocaine and shit. He needs something to bring him back down to earth. And so he snorted the Oxycontin. And maybe you don't know what that means. To snort something means to ingest it by inhaling it. So we typically, I shouldn't say we, people will typically snort cocaine, for example. So you put a line of cocaine on the table or whatever, and you snort the cocaine, right? That's basically what it means. So he snorted a bunch of prescription drugs, very powerful Oxycontin, and he nodded out. You'll also hear people say nodded off. Either one is fine. I typically say nod off, but nod out makes perfect sense too. And it just means to go to sleep like unintentionally, you know? And we usually use this term in the context of drugs. Like if somebody shoots up heroin, eventually they're going to nod off. They just fall asleep. They pass out. And apparently, if you snort a bunch of Oxycontin, the same thing will happen. So he nodded out in the middle of his shift. He was working, cooking on the grill, and just fell asleep. And then fell, arm and face first, on the grill and just cooked his shit. You know? So he was explaining this to his manager and said, "Listen, I'm a dumbass. Don't worry about workers' comp. I just want to keep my job." And workers' comp is short for workers' compensation. And this term is used to describe how would I call it? Or what would I call it, I should say. Workers' compensation is like a form of insurance, basically. So if you get hurt while you're working, let's say you do construction, you work in a warehouse or something like that, and you get hurt because of something that was wrong at your place of work. In certain cases, your employer, the person giving you the job, will be responsible for your hospital bills or your medical bills. You won't be responsible. You will be compensated as a worker for the damage that was done to you while you were at work. That's workers' comp, right? So he's saying, don't worry about that. You don't have to pay me anything. I'm a dumbass. It's my fault. I just don't want to lose my job. And so apparently 2 weeks later, he came back to work. He was completely sober, done with the drugs, done with the drinks. And now he's going to be in Atlanta working as a sous chef with he's got a fiance now and all that stuff. So it looks like he's turned his life around. He's on a good path now, you know, but that's some wild shit. And I will say that in my limited experience, I would have to agree with the statement that drug use is pretty common in kitchens, at least in the US, man. I've worked in various restaurants. I've worked at pizza joints, burger joints. And I don't know about hard drugs like Oxycontin, bro. I don't know if I ever saw somebody doing shit like that. But definitely a lot of weed smoking. a little bit of beer, a little bit of whiskey, depending on your position. Um, and I'm sure people were doing other shit. Like when I was in college working at Pizza Hut, it was a normal thing to like come to work high as fuck. Even if you're the delivery driver, you smoke a blunt, smoke two joints or something like that and go to work. Or even on your break at work, go out back and smoke some weed. And depending on your manager, it was cool. It just didn't say anything. Now, obviously, that's not legal. You can't smoke weed and then drive a car delivering pizzas and shit. In America, they treat that like drinking and driving. It's the same thing. But it was very, very, very common. And I've obviously heard lots of rumors about harder drugs being used, especially in like those high-end restaurants, the five-star restaurants and shit, where it's very high stress. Everything needs to be perfect. These people are spending tons of money. We need to maintain our reputation. I would imagine lots of people are taking Adderall, fucking snorting coke or whatever it may be, just to hold it together every fucking night. You know what I'm saying? So that's story number one, y'all. This crazy ass coked out motherfucker who decided to snort a couple of lines before he came to work. I mean, I don't know. I've never tried cocaine, and to be honest, I don't think it would be a good idea for my personality type. But I'm curious to know. Maybe one of y'all have tried the white gold. I don't know. What do y'all think about cocaine? Everybody I've ever talked to that was on cocaine just seemed to be so fucking had so much energy, or so aggressive. It's like, yo, chill the fuck out. You need some weed, bro? What the fuck? It just doesn't seem like the type of drug that you would take and then sit down somewhere and chill. And those are the drugs I like. I don't want to be fucking. I'm already like high strung. I don't need to be more turned up. You know what I'm saying? And I'm using lots of slang, my bad. So, high strung is a term that we use to describe somebody who has lots of energy. They're probably a little bit neurotic. It's hard for them to just sit down and be calm. You know, they're like the little fucking Energizer bunny. Just got a lot of fucking energy. Very high strung. And what did I say? I'm already high strung enough. I don't need to be more turned up. Turned up is also a slang term that just means very animated, tons of energy. Usually it's a positive thing to be turned up. Like you go to a party, you drink a lot, and you get turned up. Have some fun. You got lots of energy. You want to have fun. You're acting crazy. But depending on the context, it can be negative because if you snort some cocaine, you get too turned up, you might be trying to start fights with people. So it's not always positive, but it generally means just tons of energy, acting a little bit crazy. You just acting wild, like a wild animal, just turned up, you know, as if you turned up the energy on your brain or your body, like you turn up the volume on the radio or something like that. You turned up, turned all the way up. Sometimes you'll hear that too. But that's story number one, my friends. We gonna move right on to story number two. Before we get started, let me remind you that you have access to, well, if you're a gold member, you have access to the vocabulary guides and all that. And I've separated the vocabulary guides into 3 documents because it's 3 stories, tons of vocabulary and example sentences and all that. And it would just be too much for one document. So hopefully this way it'll be a bit easier. But you guys can let me know in the comments which one you prefer. All right. Okay, my friends, let me get a sip of this beer and then we'll move on to story number 2. All right. Did you guys know you can't buy beer between the hours of 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. and midnight and 11 a.m. in Bangkok, Thailand? In the state of Georgia in the United States, you can't buy alcohol on Sundays, which is interesting. Anyway, has nothing to do with this episode. Let's move on to story number 2. Here we go. I work as a supervisor in a drugstore. One night, one of my employees was seen just letting someone walk out with hundreds of dollars of merchandise. A few minutes later, he went outside to collect the shopping carts. I am reviewing the video evidence of this happening at the time and on the phone with my store manager. The employee was outside for a pretty decent amount of time. I hadn't noticed right away because I was busy collecting the evidence, but my other cashier called me up and told me that he still hadn't come back in, 15 minutes later. As I walk downstairs, he comes back inside with one shopping cart and the guy was high as a kite. Because I'm not the store manager, my hands are rather tied as far as what I'm able to do at the time. So I just send him home and keep someone else for the rest of the night. The employee called me later and started talking about how he hates snitches and that people should just leave other people alone. He was rambling on and on. The next day, the loss prevention manager was there, as well as my manager. The employee was terminated. It turned out that he would let his friends walk out with baskets of merchandise without scanning it. Then he would go collect carts and they would give him meth in payment for all the stuff. Jesus. He thought he had his master plan and that he was sticking it to the man. It was really sad to see. Since then, the employee has been incarcerated and successfully completed rehab. I'm glad to say that he's doing much better now and has apologized profusely about the entire incident. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this story actually, I guess it's not the most surprising story I've ever heard. And I'm sure there's a lot of words and phrases that weren't so clear. So just like with the other story, I'm going to go back and explain the nouns, the verbs, and the adjectives. So, first paragraph. This person telling the story was or is a supervisor at a drugstore or a pharmacy. And one night, one of the supervisor's employees was seen just letting somebody walk out with hundreds of dollars of merchandise. Now, to let someone walk out, especially in this context, it refers to the idea that you let somebody leave the store without paying. So again, one of my employees was seen just letting someone walk out with hundreds of dollars of merchandise. Now, the word merchandise describes products that are available for sale in a store. It's just I wouldn't say formal term, but it's a more specific term that you really only hear in the context of buying or selling products, right? So this employee was just letting some people, friends or whoever, leave the store without scanning and paying for the products. Hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise or hundreds of dollars worth of products. The person just let them walk out or leave the store without paying. And so a few minutes later, this same employee went outside to collect the shopping carts. Now, basically, I don't know if you guys do something similar in your countries, but in the US, something that's extremely common is when you go to a big store, we have shopping carts, those plastic little cars that you use to hold all your products while you walk through the store. And so if he went outside to collect the shopping carts, basically, when you leave the store after buying all your products, you don't have to go back inside with the cart and leave it inside. There's typically places designated for leaving carts after you've already made your purchase. So you put all your bags in the car. You should, most people don't, but you should then take that cart over to the designated area where the carts stay until somebody comes to collect them and bring them back into the store. I hope that makes sense. So this employee went to the area to collect or gather or take all those cards back inside. But he was out there for quite some time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And so the supervisor is actually watching this employee, I guess on one of the security cameras, gathering all the evidence, seeing this person's strange behavior, right? And so the guy comes back in 15, 20 minutes later, and he's high as a kite. Now, you won't hear this every day, but it's not strange if you say it. If somebody is high as a kite, it means that they are just extremely high. And just in case it's not clear, we typically use the word drunk when we are intoxicated because of some liquid. We're drinking alcohol or something like that. But for drugs, weed, cocaine, heroin, meth, PCP, you name it, any drug that you don't drink, you typically get high, even though they both mean intoxicated. So when somebody says high as a kite, it means that they are extremely high off of something. And so we find out later in the story, this guy was high off of meth, high off that Walter White, baby, high off that motherfucker. What'd they call it in the series? Blue something. Blue diamond, blue fucking, I don't remember. It was blue something, right? It was something weird about his process that made the meth turn blue. I don't remember. Anyway, so this guy was high as a kite. And then the manager goes on to, or not the manager, the supervisor says, because I'm not the store manager, my hands are rather tied as far as what I'm able to do at the time. Now, that is a relatively advanced sentence. So this person is not the store manager, and therefore they do not have the power to fire this employee. They do not have the power to say, your employment is being terminated, you must go home and never come back. The person telling the story didn't have the power to do that. So the person telling the story, his or her hands were rather tied. So if your hands are tied, it just means that you can't do anything. You don't have the authority to take a particular action, you know? So I'm just off the top of my head, a simple example is maybe you want to go to a stand-up comedy show in your city, but you have to buy a ticket to get in. You get there, I don't know, 20 minutes late, and you're at the door asking if you can still buy a ticket. And the person at the window says, listen, we're sold out. It's too late. You can't buy a ticket now. Actually, not even sold out. Not even sold out. You just arrived too late, so you can't go inside. You have to arrive on time. Anybody who arrives late cannot go inside. And so after the person tells you that, you say, oh, come on, man. It's only 20 minutes late. I got money. I'll pay you. Just let me inside. And the person at the window says, listen, man, my hands are tied. My hands are tied. I cannot do anything. It's not my decision. I just work here. I'm not the boss. I'm not the owner. I don't have the authority to let you inside. If I let you inside, I might lose my job. And I don't even fucking know you. So I'm not going to risk my job for you. My hands are tied. So just imagine your hands literally being tied together and you can't move them. You can't do anything. You're just stuck. So the person telling the story says, my hands are tied as far as what I'm able to do. Now, the phrase as far as is relatively advanced, but it's very useful. So I think it's important to learn this one. As far as basically means in relation to or concerning this thing or regarding this thing. So let me say the sentence again. Because I'm not the store manager, my hands are rather tied as far as what I'm able to do about this. Meaning, because I'm not the store manager, there's really nothing I can do with regards to this situation. There's nothing I can do about this situation. There's nothing I can do concerning this situation in particular. As far as this, I can't do anything. As far as this situation, my hands are tied. So when we talk about this, there's nothing I can do. I really hope that makes sense because the phrase doesn't make any literal sense. As far as doesn't make any literal sense, but when you're listening to natives, at least, or any advanced English speaker, you're going to hear this from time to time. It's very, very common. Okay. So this person's hands are tied. So they just sent the employee home for the rest of the night. They said, listen, you're clearly high. Just fucking go home, man. Sleep, do whatever you got to do. Don't come back to this place high. Come back sober. Right. And so then the same employee that got sent home called the supervisor, who happened to be best friends with the guy's sister. And he started talking about how he hates snitches and that people should just leave other people alone. So the guy who got sent home, the guy who was high on fucking methamphetamine, called the supervisor and said, I hate snitches. Now, snitch is a slang term that's used to describe anybody who informs the police of something that has been something wrong that has been done, some kind of wrongdoing, so imagine you rob a bank and your friend knows you robbed a bank and your friend can prove that you robbed a bank. If your friend then goes and talks to the police and tells them that you robbed the bank and shows them the evidence, your friend is now a snitch. The child version of that word would be tattletale. When we were little kids, we would say nobody likes a tattletale, which is somebody who is telling on other people, going to the teacher and saying, John did this and that, Sarah did this, Ashley did that, right? Just telling on people, just telling the teacher all the wrong things that all the other kids have done. That's a tattletale. And when we grow up, we call that same person a fucking snitch, right? You might also hear people say snitches get stitches. Now, this is originally some gangster shit, but it's become a common phrase no matter what cultural background you come from or what your lifestyle is. And just in case you don't know, stitches are what you get when you have a cut or a gash on your body that is too big to close by itself. So you need to take a needle and some very fine string and close the wound so that it heals properly. Otherwise, it's not going to close. So maybe you've seen like a UFC fight or a boxing match when the dude gets hit so hard that he ends up with a large, deep cut somewhere on his face. And that cut is not going to close naturally. He needs stitches. He needs to stitch the wound closed. Or close, sorry. He needs to stitch it closed. So those are stitches. So when we say snitches get stitches, basically what we're saying is if you tell on me, I'm gonna fuck you up. You tell on me, I'm gonna fuck you up, dog. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna beat your ass so bad that you are going to need stitches. If I'm explaining it literally, that's what I would say. You know, snitches get stitches, dog. Right? Maybe I'd say this to my nephew all the time, or I used to say this to my nephew whenever I do something, and he'd be ready to tell my fucking mom, his grandma. You know what I'm saying? I'd be like, hey, bro, snitches get stitches, bro. Be quiet, dog, or I'll fuck you up. So back to the story. This guy is saying, I hate snitches. People should just leave other people alone. And so the next day, the loss prevention manager was at the pharmacy or the drugstore, and so was the manager. And the employee was terminated or fired. His contract of employment was terminated. He no longer had a job at this pharmacy, right? And it turned out that, like I said earlier, every night or whenever his friends would come through, he would let them just steal a bunch of shit and then go outside and act like he was collecting the shopping carts, go smoke methamphetamines, and then come back to work. I don't understand. I've never done meth, but it doesn't seem like the type of drug you can just do and then go back to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, go back to work and deal with people. That's a customer service position at a pharmacy. And you're high on meth talking to people? That's fucking wild, bro. That's some wild shit. Like, I could understand weed, or you had a couple beers or a couple shots or something, you can function. But methamphetamine, dog? This must have been in fucking Ohio or some shit. It's like, I don't know. I don't know. That's a strange drug of choice, don't you think? Marijuana, I can understand. Cigarettes, alcohol, beer, even cocaine, I can understand. But meth? Jesus. Ah, anyway, let's get through this last paragraph. So, this guy thought he had a master plan and that he was sticking it to the man. This is a phrase that you probably won't hear very often these days. I think it was more common in the 80s or the 70s and you know, back when the hippies were really popping in the US. And to stick it to the man is an expression that basically means to rebel against authority, to rebel against societal norms. The man refers to the man in charge, whoever that may be. Could be one person or 100 people, the most powerful, rich, and corrupt people that govern our society. That's the man. So to stick it to the man means to rebel against the man or to resist whatever it is they want you to do, to try and hurt them in some way. Because to stick it to somebody is what I just described. It's like you're trying to make their lives harder. You're rebelling against them in some way. You're attacking them, but almost never physically. It's like a psychological attack or an emotional attack of some kind, right? So maybe you choose not to pay taxes in order to stick it to the man, to stick it to the government. So you can say, fuck. That's your way of saying fuck you to the government. You're sticking it to the government, right? It's a form of resistance or rebellion. Or I don't know, your parents are saying clean your room every day and you refuse to clean your room. You're sticking it to your parents. You're rebelling. You're saying, fuck you, mom and dad. I'm not cleaning my room. I'm a free man, 9 years old, bitch. Free man. You don't tell me what to do. That's sticking it to the man. So apparently this guy thought he was sticking it to the man by letting his friends steal merchandise from a drugstore in exchange for methamphetamines, which is sad. As the person says here in the story, it was sad to see. And since that incident, The employee has been incarcerated, which is a formal word for locked up or arrested and taken to jail. If somebody is incarcerated, it means that they are in prison. They're locked up, which is the same thing. You can get locked up, which means taken to jail. And then if you are locked up currently, it means you are in jail, right? So he's been incarcerated. He successfully completed rehab, which is short for rehabilitation. And rehab is a word that's used to refer to the place where you go to rehabilitate from drug addiction. So I don't know exactly what happens there. I've only seen stuff on TV and movies, but apparently it's like a resort or a spa for people who are addicted to drugs and need to be cured, right? I guess that's the idea. I don't know. So the person finishes by saying, I'm glad to say he's doing much better now, and he has apologized profusely about the entire... Excuse me. Jesus. No more drinking beer during the pod, man. It makes me burp and hiccup and shit. I'm sorry. So the person finishes by saying they're glad to see that this guy is doing much better now and that he has apologized profusely about the entire incident. Now, to apologize profusely just means to a great degree, to apologize excessively or abundantly, to apologize a lot. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry. As like apologizing profusely, right? And we typically use this adverb profusely with the verb apologize. I struggle to think of another example or another time when I would use the adverb profusely. It's usually with apologize. We apologize profusely. Just so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Right? And so he apologized profusely about the entire incident. Now, the word incident is relatively formal, if you ask me, but it's not strange. You'll hear it in many contexts. And another word would be event or occurrence. These are synonyms for the word incident. But incident is typically used in a negative context, some kind of conflict or wrongdoing or something unpleasant, like an argument in the street with a complete stranger. That's an incident. Or a car accident. That's an incident. It's also an event or an occurrence, but incident, if you ask me, has a more negative connotation, whereas event or occurrence are more neutral. Just something that happened. All right? All right, my friends, that is story number 2. We started off with some dude tweaked out on cocaine, grilling his face and arms on the fucking burger grill. And story number 2, this dude's tweaked out on fucking methamphetamine. Let's see what we got in story number 3, y'all. Let's get right into it. Here we go. Bob lasted 2 weeks, which was about 2 weeks longer than he should have. During orientation, he challenged me on several of our rules, many of them having to do with health and safety. He did not want to wear eye protection or closed-toed shoes since it was too hot in our climate-controlled manufacturing plant. He wore a Bluetooth headset, which he proceeded to answer several times throughout orientation, and when informed that personal cell phone use was only permitted during scheduled breaks, he informed me that he was conducting business and needed it. This was when I decided Bob needed to go. However, HR and the company president also needed to sign off on it, and after 3 hours decided I had not given him a fair shake. Bob was untrainable. He had one job to do: balance material in a centrifuge and make sure it was draining. We had charts posted outlining how many of what to put in and how to arrange things. So after working with him for a day, showing him and overseeing him arrange and balance, I was satisfied that I could leave him unattended for 5 minutes while I grabbed a washroom break. I was dead wrong. I started to hear the clanking of metal on metal and run back to shut down the machine to find that it was not loaded or balanced properly. When asked why he loaded it against regulation, he said, "It takes too long to arrange everything." Still, nobody wants to get rid of him except me. So as the GM of a manufacturing plant, I spent the next week with Bob, babysitting him as he loaded a centrifuge until I finally had to leave him to do my actual job. In under an hour, from improper loading, he damaged the machine. While I was loading, setting up the backup, I instructed him to go to the boardroom to review the loading charts and that I would call him back when I was finished. About 20 minutes later, I go to the boardroom. No Bob. There's nobody in the men's room. As I'm walking back to my production floor, I notice that there's somebody in the president's office. This is pretty strange, since the president is out of the office that day, and the only two people who are permitted in the office are myself and the office manager. And wouldn't you know it, just down the hall, the office manager is happily chugging away at some reports in her office. So I go in, only to reveal, or find, Bob watching some of the most depraved Spanish porn on the president's computer. And while I didn't have the power to, I terminated him on the spot and cleared it with HR and the president later, who, with a quick viewing of his browser history, agreed that it was justified. Apparently, Bob didn't know how to browse incognito. Bob has since filed a legal case with HRSDC for wrongful dismissal. Oh boy, Bob, Bobbity Bob, oh Bob, which apparently is not his real name. The person, just in case you're not reading the vocabulary guide, the person who wrote this story is calling this person Bob, but makes it clear that that is not his real name. And so, old Bob Buddy Boy was beating his meat on the president's computer, apparently. I don't know if I believe this story. I really don't know if I believe this, but that is the story. This motherfucker didn't last 2 weeks on the job, bro. And just in case you don't know, we have officially transitioned to the explanation part of the story. I'm going to go back to the beginning and explain everything. So, Bob lasted just 2 weeks. Have any of you listening lasted at a job for less than a month? I think the quickest I've ever quit a job was actually, no. I've quit a job after 1 day. I was going to say after 4 months, but I remember one particularly shitty job, a telemarketing company. I did 1 day and I was just like, yeah, I can't do this shit. I fucking can't. I mean, it was like in the movies, bro, literally sitting in a cubicle, calling person after person, trying to sell them fucking solar panels. Jesus Christ. Anyway, Bob here, old Bob Spanish porn buddy, he lasted 2 weeks. So to last a particular amount of time just means that it continues to exist or function for a particular amount of time. So if you last 2 weeks at this job, it means that after 2 weeks, you either get fired or you quit, you say you can't do it anymore, whatever. It's over now. So it lasted or existed or operated for a duration of, in this case, 2 weeks. So he lasted 2 weeks, which was about 2 weeks longer than he should have. Now, when the person writing the story says this, they're implying or emphasizing the fact that they believe 2 weeks was actually too long. He never deserved a job in the first place. He should have never been hired. He only lasted 2 weeks, and even that was too long. You see? Now, during orientation, which is what happens at many jobs when they teach you how things work, the rules and regulations, they answer questions, give you your uniform and all that, that is orientation. They are orienting you inside the company, letting you know this is where to find this is who to talk to about that, this is what we wear, this is what you can and cannot do. That's orientation. So Bob apparently challenged this supervisor or manager on several rules. And to challenge someone in this context basically means to question them or dispute something that they're saying. So maybe they say, you need to wear eye protection. And Bob says, but I don't want to wear eye protection. It's too uncomfortable. It's too hot. It's blah, blah, blah. Bob is now challenging what the supervisor has said, saying something that goes against what they say, protesting, fighting back, saying no, something like that. So Bob challenged me on several of our rules, many of them having to do with health and safety. Now, the phrase to have to do with, which is such a strange phrase, to have to do with simply means to be related to or associated with. So when I say he challenged me on several rules, many of them having to do with health and safety, what do you think that means? It means he challenged me on many rules, many of them related to or concerning or associated with health and safety. Now, this phrase to have to do with is extremely common, at least in American English. So it's very important to learn. I know it's strange. This has to do with that. It sounds weird, but it's very, very, very common. Okay. So, just another example. Your sister might come to you and say, listen, I just crashed my car. It's going to cost me $1,300 to get it fixed. And you're looking at her like, okay, what does that have to do with me? Why are you telling me I'm not going to give you any fucking money? I don't care. What does that have to do with me? How does that concern me? How is that related to me? What does that have to do with me? I have nothing to do with that. You see? I have no concern about that. I'm not related to that. I'm not associated with that. It has nothing to do with me, and I have nothing to do with it. All right, let's keep going. So he challenged the people on many rules. He said it's too hot in here. He wore a Bluetooth headset, which is basically just the little headphone or earphone that you put in your ear, and it allows you to talk on the phone without holding the phone to your ears. These days, we have wired headphones with little microphones on them. We have AirPods or other wireless headphones with microphones. Back in the day, it was just a Bluetooth headset specifically for talking on the phone. You couldn't listen to music, right? So he wore a Bluetooth headset, which he proceeded to answer several times throughout orientation or during orientation. And he told the supervisors, I'm conducting business. I know I'm not supposed to use my headphone or my headset in here, but I'm doing business. I need it. Right? And this is when the manager said, okay, Bob needs to go. We need to fire this motherfucker. He's clearly going to be a problem. But in order to fire this person, the supervisor had to clear the decision or get the decision approved by HR and the company president. So there was nothing they could do. Their hands were tied. You remember this phrase? Their hands were tied. There's nothing they could do because they didn't have the authority to take any further action. Okay? So Bob was untrainable, meaning he could not be trained. And he only had one job to do, which was balance material in a centrifuge, which is a word you'll probably never hear. I had to learn it while working on this episode. And apparently a centrifuge is a machine that uses centrifugal force to separate substances or particles of different densities. That right there is way over my head, so I don't know what they're talking about. And really quick, if I say something is over my head, or if something is over your head, it means that it is too advanced or complex for you to comprehend. So anything related to physics, that shit is over my head, bro. You know, I don't understand it. I have no experience in that field. If you talk to me about physics, it's the same thing as speaking to me in German. I will understand absolutely nothing because it's over my head. You see? Or if something goes over your head, another thing that you'll hear, something goes over your head, it means that you didn't understand it. Somebody tried to explain something to you and it went right over your head as opposed to in your head, which is not something that we say, but I'm trying to just illustrate the point with words so that you can visualize what I'm saying. So if this idea or this thing that somebody said went over your head, it means that they tried to explain it, you tried to understand, but you just couldn't. Too complex, too complicated. It's over your head, bro. All right? So, getting back to centrifuge, apparently he had to balance centrifuge material or whatever and make sure it was draining properly, make sure the machine was functioning properly. And so the boss had to basically babysit this guy because he kept doing it wrong. He kept fucking it up, destroying machines and doing this and that. And so finally, the supervisor got tired and says, let's just go to the fucking boardroom, look at the charts, review the information. I'll do it. I will do your job. I'm going to balance the centrifuge. And after that, when I'm done, I'll call you back and then we'll keep going. So that's what happens, or that's what we expect to happen. But apparently, Bob didn't go to the boardroom. Little old Bob went to the president's office and started watching porn on the president's computer. I find that so hard to believe, bro. I find it so hard to believe that a grown man would walk into the president's office and like beat his dick at work. And just in case you don't know, to beat your dick means to masturbate, to pleasure yourself sexually. And this is only used for men because the phrase to beat this particular party, it doesn't make sense with a clitoris or a vagina to beat. Well, now we're getting getting into a different topic. I've been wanting to do an episode about sexual vocabulary for a long time. I just haven't figured out how to approach it tastefully, you know? But anyway, the phrase to beat your dick is only used with men. You can only use it with dick. You can't say I beat my vagina. Or if you do, it would have a different meaning. But that's, like I said, a completely different topic for a different episode. Let's stay on topic, Mr. Kaizen. So he was beating his dick, which basically means to masturbate, to pleasure yourself sexually. And he was doing it in the president's office, bro, in the middle of work. I find that really, really hard to believe. But we're going to assume it's true for the sake of this episode and the sake of this person telling the story. So 20 minutes later, the supervisor goes to the boardroom and no Bob. Bob is not present. He's also not in the men's room. And you'll often hear this referred to, or excuse me, you'll hear this term used to refer to the bathroom or the restroom, also called the washroom, depending on what part of the US you're from. I would never say washroom, although I have heard some people say that before, and it makes perfect sense. But the men's room is obviously just more specific. It's for men, just like you have the ladies' room. You might hear somebody say woman's room, but typically we say ladies' room. Lady is a more respectful way to refer to a woman, right? This man, this gentleman, and this lady. That's why we say good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a more polite, respectful way to refer to men and women. Or you might be walking on the street and you see that lady right there. You could say, do you see that woman? Do you see that girl? Do you see that? There's many words you could use, but the most polite, I think, would be lady or that gentleman right there, right? So you have the men's room or the ladies' room. So he wasn't in the men's room. He wasn't in the bathroom. And so the supervisor's walking back to the production floor, which is where they produce things in a factory, and saw that there was somebody in the president's office, which is strange because only 2 people are allowed or permitted to be in that office. And Bob is not one of them. So the supervisor walks into the office and sees Bob masturbating to Spanish porn on the president's computer. And although the supervisor didn't have the authority or the power to do this, they still decided to terminate him on the spot, which means immediately, no hesitation. It happened now, so I react right now. This person fired him on the spot, in the moment. Didn't wait, didn't think about it. It's just, no, as soon as I see it, you're fucking fired on the spot, okay? And later, they cleared that decision with HR and the president. So to clear a decision basically means to have an authority figure tell you that it's okay. So you fire this person, even though you didn't have the power to, and later your boss clears that decision. They analyze what happened and they say, you made the right decision. Okay, he's actually fired. They cleared the decision. If your decision was not cleared, that means that the boss said, no, we're not going to fire him. We're going to bring him back, blah, blah, blah. Your decision has not been cleared. Okay? And so the president agreed to clear that decision, or to agree with that decision, after looking at his browser history. Now, just in case you don't know, browser is the app that you use on your computer to surf the internet. Browser history is just the history of all the sites that you visited since you started using the browser. And so the person goes on to say, apparently Bob didn't know how to browse incognito. Now, the word incognito by itself just means in a way that hides your identity, or it hides your actions. So if you're browsing incognito, you're browsing in a way that keeps people from knowing who you are or what you're looking at. It's being done in secret or in the darkness where nobody can see it. That's why if you look at Google Chrome and you browse incognito, the icon is some dude wearing a hat, a trench coat, and glasses, so that you can't see who he really is. He's incognito. His identity is hidden, right? And so to browse incognito just means to use the incognito browser, Google Chrome or whatever, so that we can't see a history of all the porn sites that you visited while you're beating your dick at work, bro. Jesus Christ. And then Bob apparently filed a legal case for wrongful dismissal. Now, to file a case typically means to press charges against somebody, to press legal charges. And in this case, the charge is wrongful dismissal. Wrongful means that something wrong has been done. Dismissal is like another word for termination or to get fired. If you are dismissed from your job, it typically means they send you home, most of the time permanently. You're being fired. But dismiss typically just means to tell somebody to go. They say, you can leave now. You are dismissed. Like in school, if class is dismissed or you are dismissed from class, it means that your teacher says you can go now. You can leave. That's what it means to be dismissed. So wrongful dismissal means fired unfairly, wrongfully. Something wrong has been done. I should not have been fired. They did the wrong thing. I'm innocent. I got fired for no reason. That's the idea. Which, if this story is true, you can actually see him doing something like that, right? Somebody who thinks it's okay to masturbate, to masturbate in the president's office in the middle of a workday would also think that it makes sense to fight the decision to fire him. It's like, no, this is wrong. I've done nothing wrong here. Everybody masturbates, especially in the middle of the day, especially when they're stressed at work. So you shouldn't fire me. I've done nothing wrong. I'm innocent. If this story is true, that makes total sense to me. But Jesus Christ, man. And you know what? I'm sure that's actually a lot more common than we would like to believe, right? People fucking masturbating at work. That has to be a common occurrence. And I'm sad to say it's more than likely just men doing that type of shit, dog. Like, we are some fucking savages. Jesus, man. I heard one time, a long time ago, about a story. I don't remember if it was on the news or social media. I don't remember where I saw it, but I heard, don't know if this is true, but I heard that a guy was doing something similar at a pizza joint. A guy who was making or delivering pizzas, one of the guys, was masturbating and then coming or orgasming and then letting his semen fall onto the pizza. He was coming on the pizza, bro, before it was delivered to the customers. Which is, man, just, if hell is a real place and people really do burn for eternity in that place, that's the kind of person that needs to take a long trip to hell, bro. That's just like, why would you do that? I could understand if you had like some personal fucking issue with whoever it may be, like you're getting revenge for something they did to you. I guess in that situation, I might be able to see where you're coming from. But you're just choosing to fuck with people's food like that? It's like, yo, man, yo. There's just something about, apart from that being fucking disgusting, period, in any context, there's also just something about people who consciously choose to hurt other people that they know are defenseless. You know what I mean? Like somebody who's 180 centimeters tall, fucking 90 kilos heavy, and is choosing to fuck with somebody who's like 150 centimeters tall, 50 kilos. It's like, dude, you know, on any day you could beat the shit out of that person. Why are you fucking with them? In English, we'd say pick on somebody your own size. To pick on somebody means to harass or agitate or fuck with somebody in some way. And your own size is taken literally. You're much bigger than this person, so why don't you try to attack somebody the same size as you? You're not going to do that because you're a fucking coward. You know what I mean? You're a bitch. And there's just something about that. Somebody who chooses to fuck with people who are defenseless. You know there's nothing they can do to retaliate. And that's the main reason why you're attacking them, is because they can't return the attack. There's just something about that, bro. Special place. I wouldn't even say hell. You know what I mean? I don't really believe in that. I don't believe in the biblical, like metaphorical place that is hell. I don't believe in some place that evil souls go to burn for eternity. I do believe that hell is a real place, but I don't think we experience it after death. That's a completely different topic, isn't it? I'm just saying there should be a special place, and special is a positive word, isn't it? There should be a very particularly horrible place for people like that. It's just, and I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. I've done some fucked up shit in my time. So maybe I need to go there. I'm just saying that you know what I'm saying, right? Like that in particular. Just fucking with people who are defenseless. Like, you a bitch, bro. Just a bitch, you know what I'm saying? But anyway. All of that has nothing to do with story number 3, so we're gonna move right along. I guess that's the end of the episode. Story 1 was about a dude tweaked out on coke, burning his face off on the grill. Story 2, a dude helping his drug dealers or his friends, I guess, steal shit from a pharmacy in exchange for free meth. And story number 3, old Bob Buddy Boy jacking off at work to some Spanish porn. They felt the need to be specific with that too, like depraved Spanish porn. And these are just 3 of the certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of insane stories about things that employers have to deal with, I think managers don't get enough credit, dog. Like, as an employee, you typically hate your manager because they almost always exist only to make sure you're not fucking up or make sure you're not doing the wrong thing. And if you're an employee, especially if you're young, you're 16, 18, 21, you don't want to be working this bullshit job. You're coming in high as fuck on cocaine or methamphetamine. And then your manager comes around saying, look, you got to go home, bro. You can't come here high as fuck. I mean, fuck you, bro. I'm just trying to make some money, bro. Free country, man. Free country, dude. Legalize it, bro. That's the type of shit managers have to deal with on a daily basis. Employees fighting and shit, problems with customers, the business owner talking shit. Just this, man. Managers have to deal with a lot of shit. Anybody that has to manage other people has to deal with a lot of shit. Coaches of football teams, restaurant managers, store managers at the mall and shit, parents who have children. You name it. Anybody who has to manage other people has just got to put up with so much shit, Because you can't talk to people any way you want to talk to them. And it's tricky because as an authority figure who's responsible for managing other people, you want to maintain a light and positive atmosphere. You want people to be happy at work. You want them to be happy on your team. You want them to be happy to be part of the family or whatever. And at the same time, if you try to be their friend, then they won't respect you. And if they don't respect you, they're not going to do what you say. You have no authority at that point. You can't physically harm them. The most you can do is fire them, maybe, if you have the authority to do so. And even then, if you fire them, now you have to go find another employee. And until you do, you're missing an employee. So somebody has to make up for all that work that the old employee used to. It's just fucking A, dude. Fucking A. So much respect to all the managers out there, be it store managers, parents, team coaches, you fucking name it, dude. I know it's hard. So keep your head up out there because these motherfuckers is crazy, bro. These motherfuckers is crazy. But anyway, for this particular episode, there will be no quiz because it's 3 stories. It's already tons of content for you to consume, tons of vocabulary, example sentences, things like that. But if you have any questions about this episode or any other episode, you should know by now, you can always contact me on Patreon, on Discord, email, whatever it may be. Any questions about English or American culture, anything that's not clear, feel free to contact me and I'll do my best to help you out. But that is it for this episode of Real English Radio, my friend. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I am your host, Tony Kaizen, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.